Welcome back. Adaptability is defined as being able to adjust to different conditions and a new environment. That's been the underlying theme of Sid Kirschner's career. His adaptive skills have allowed him to work in a variety of capacities across a series of unrelated disciplines. Each step along the way, he gained knowledge and information that he transferred to the next job. At a time when most people are cashing in their retirement savings and taking it easy, Sid Kirschner is still going strong, heading one of the nation's most respected heart institutes. It's all about the joy of work in today's edition of Executive Profiles with Ed Baker.
Okay, Mr. Versatility, take us back to the path that brought you to Atlanta.
Well, actually, at that time, I was running a small division of a very large corporation in New Jersey. Got a call, I remember this so vividly because there was a party at my house. It was Saturday night, and like most parties, you're in the kitchen. The phone was near my left shoulder. It rang, and it was a gentleman who said, "Can you meet me at the airport tomorrow? You've been recommended for a job." So I remember getting up very early in the morning, going to the airport, being interviewed by someone who really talked and never gave me a chance to answer a question. I remember I came home and said to my wife, she said, "Are we going to go someplace?" I said, "No chance at all." And a few days later, I was visiting Atlanta, and a few days later, I was moving to Atlanta.
And you had worked in the aeronautics industry.
Yes, at that time, I was with a company called Curtiss-Wright. They had an old aircraft engine company that had migrated to the aerospace industry, and I was involved in that phase of their business.
So that was your first career?
No, that was I started in the, I started many years ago at the beginning of the rocket and missile era. It was shortly after Sputnik was launched, and America got very excited to try to catch up.
And you came to Atlanta to work for?
A company called National Service Industries.
And the core business was what?
National Linen. It was the original business, and it delivered and provided linen products for restaurants and hospitals, industrial uniforms, and they had maybe 50, 60 locations throughout the Southeast.
What made you write for that job?
I don't know.
Aeronautics and linens.
What I remember very clearly is with the companies I had were all run by the people who owned those companies. And all of a sudden they had this kid stranger, and they were older than me, wealthier than me, and knew their business much better. And so they really had no reason to want to listen to me. And so the time passed and things worked out.
And what about Zepp?
Well, Zepp was one of the companies of the corporation I was with, which was called National Service. And it was actually the company that the CEO of the company came from. The Z in Zepp was a gentleman named Erwin Zabin.
Where did you take that company from to?
I think
and don't be shy.
I think when I came, we were maybe a $250 million company, and when I left, it was close to $3 billion.
So you decided in around, what was it, about 1992, that it was time for you to, quote, retire?
Yes.
What a joke.
You know, it's like a lot of people, they wake up one day, this time I was on an airplane, and sort of felt I really had not done what I wanted to do in a long, long time, what I did in the evening, when I went on vacation. And so I just decided to leave. And it turned out by coincidence I was a trustee of a hospital here in Atlanta, Northside Hospital, that was just going through some difficulties. And the board of the hospital, since they saw I was now unemployed, they asked me to go to the hospital for a few months and see what can be done. And I ended up staying for 12 years there.
And then you went on to Davis Academy?
Correct. It's a K-8 private school. And
why did you take that job? What was the motivation? Wasn't it then time to, quote, retire?
Well, it was, but I found that I really had nothing to do in retirement.
And you were there for 5 years?
Correct.
And made quite a few changes while you were there?
Well, it grew, and it was successful. And private schools are difficult things because each year is a new year. You got to start all over, recruit another class, make sure the graduating class is appropriately educated and is successful and becomes your reference point for the kindergarten children who come aboard.
So you've completed 5 years, you've graduated from Davis.
Yes.
And then what?
Well, actually, while I was at Davis finishing what I thought would be my last year, an old colleague, the CEO of Piedmont Healthcare, sort of a colleague competitor, who I really had not seen or spoken to in 10 years, called me and asked me if I could come assist Piedmont.
And you've been at Piedmont now for how long?
3 years.
So if I add it all together,
Yes.
how long has your diverse, versatile career been now?
A long time. I've always put work first. It's the thing that satisfies me and allows me to be loyal to family and faith. So I always say that the measure of your contribution is what happens after you're gone. You know, it could be 2 or 3 years depending where it is, and so it's not the day you leave and what you've accomplished, but what have you put in that sustains it. Right now what satisfies me is when I look back at Davis as a successful, even when I look back at Northside, in both cases the person I picked to succeed me is still running the show.
You've not only been successful in business, but in terms of philanthropy, you've always been a big giver in this community. What's the driving motivation there?
You can't just be successful, it's like a neighborhood. If you don't help the surrounding area and the edges start to collapse, it eventually gets to you. So I've always felt, how could an Atlanta business be healthy if you don't contribute some time to the community to make that healthy?
Give some inspiration and some messages to those people who are 55 years old and not looking to retire and follow the same path that you followed.
Well, I think the first thing I would say is community is a very satisfying thing, but you can't start being a volunteer the day you retire. You have to make that investment while you're still very active.
Closing comments, what are you most proud of?
You know, my children live here in Atlanta. They've stayed in Atlanta, so without ever me asking them to stay here. That relationship has worked out. And I think that almost every area I've worked in, people recall my presence.
Thank you. Stay healthy.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Total pleasure.
In 2012, the Marcus Foundation donated $20 million to the Piedmont Heart Institute to establish the first heart valve center in the nation. It's deemed a one-stop shop for patients with heart valve problems, plus a training ground for physicians wanting to learn about the latest advances in treatment for heart valve patients.